Today I have Lance McCarthy. Lance is a .NET and Windows Dev MVP from Microsoft. He's a senior manager, technical support of Progress for Dev Tools and Sitefinity, and he's an old buddy who has helped me in more ways than I can say. Lance, how are you?
I'm doing great. Hey Jesse, it's good to see you, and I'm honored to be on the show today.
Well, the honor is both ways, I think.
Yeah,
We go back a long ways. As I remember, you were helping me dig myself out of holes 5, 6, 7 years ago.
yeah. Matter of fact, when I first met you was around 2012-ish, maybe slightly before. I was doing hackathons, and you and Michael were at Telerik at the time as developer evangelists, and we would cross paths at like developer events and stuff. And then as fate would have it, I ended up taking a job at Telerik, and we were coworkers for a few years. But
Until they
yep,
kicked me out.
yeah,
So we go back 12, 13 years. That's impressive.
yeah,
All right, we're not going to talk about that.
yeah.
But I would like to talk about a couple areas that you have expertise. Let's start, because it just came out, with talking about 2026. But I want to make sure that we get to MCP, because that is something that I've not talked to anyone about on the podcast. So we'll make sure we save time for that. But 2026, Visual Studio 2026 just came out. So what are your early impressions and how long have you been working with it?
I'm loving it. Like the McDonald's slogan. Um, some of the privileges of being MVP is we're under NDA and we get early access to things to give feedback. So I've been using it for a few months now. Um, and what they've released already, I think, is like production ready. There might be some quirks here and there for some edge cases, but it is extremely fast from my perspective. I do a lot of .NET work, right? So I'm not loading big C++ solutions, but I hear it's just as good for those devs too. So I'll have like a .NET MAUI project, even though in the Solution Explorer it looks like one project, behind the scenes it's acting like four different projects, including the class library. Um, but it just, I don't know, it loads right away. And if you watch at the background tasks when it's, setting up the symbol server, loading up the class definitions, all that kind of stuff that kind of would chug down VS 2019 and 2022 seem to be pretty instant now. Like less than a minute for everything I need to get started. But if I wanted to do some coding, it's 10 or 15 seconds.
Yes, it is. The load is, in my experience, blazingly fast, and build is extremely fast. When I bought for 2022, I wanted to speed it up, and I bought 64 gig of memory, and it was a total waste. I wasn't getting much performance enhancement over 16. Now I am. Now it's taking advantage of all of that memory. It's taking advantage of multiple core virtual core, and my experience is that that is probably the single biggest benefit of going to 2026. Plus, it
Yeah,
looks nice.
yeah. I mean, the styling changes are kind of cool. Like, it's kind of mandatory to do that, right? Imagine we are Microsoft and we're going to put out this new big, great thing. And technically, an amazing feat that you can now use all the cores, you can use all the memory. But what if it looked exactly like it did in 2022? Yeah. But we had those discussions early on in like different ways that the toolbar, like if you look up at the toolbar, the way those little islands, they're a little bit more clear now, not just like a little handle and everything else
Right.
looks the same. I kind of like how they look like little islands. The Solution Explorer, I like the hollow folder appearance. But even better is the built-in themes. They're much better than they used to be. Like I'm preferring this one called Cool Slate, I think it is,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
a
My
bluish.
only complaint, and I got to call up Mads and yell at him, is
Yeah.
that when you change the theme, it changes it on all the open instances of Visual Studio. And what
Ooh,
I would
yeah.
like is it only changed it on one so that I can differentiate between, oh, that's the one I'm working on here as opposed to the other one. Now, he does have a little plugin that'll put a color around the edges. It's not sufficient. I really would like to have, full color on one and the other, but, can't have everything. And
That's how I
besides, I
have
want to
my
copy that.
Edge set up, Microsoft Edge. Like I'll have one profile, one color, and it's very easy, especially when it comes to like your. I need to keep my work profiles very separate from other profile windows. So Edge lets you do that, right? You can stay signed in with an SSO account in one profile, and then all the different tabs you open there will be able to use that signed in profile. So we'll have one tab, one instance of, let's say it's red, and the other one is green. But yeah, that would be pretty cool with Visual Studio.
Yes, yes, I'm hoping for that. And I keep trying to decide whether I need finally to learn VS Code because when we
Hmm.
get to MCP servers, we'll talk about how that's cross platform. But I've been working in Visual Studio since before there was Visual Studio. And that's kind of my home. And in fact, when I installed, we were just talking about this, Writer. Um, Come on, help me here. The
The
product, the
Resharper extension or
thank you, the
Writer?
ReSharper
Yeah.
extension. Yes, when I installed the ReSharper extension, I found that I was so comfortable in Visual Studio, and for most of the refactoring stuff I wanted to do at the time, ReSharper had a fair amount of overhead. Now I should probably reinstall it and see with 26 whether I still experience that slowdown, because my guess is that not that they've optimized already.
They have. I do use ReSharper, and they have this new auto process model. So, kind of that initial headroom it needed is pretty much offloaded, and code analysis and all the other stuff it does is offloaded.
Great, I will give it another go.
I'm not sure if it's 100% released, but it's definitely in the preview that they're doing. But you'll see it. You'll have an option to choose in process model or out of process model. The out of process one, you should definitely try that.
Okay. Before we move on, talk a little bit about what's happening with Progress and where your area of concern is with Progress. Feel free to do a little commercial for Progress.
Okay, yeah. So for those who aren't familiar with Progress, the company name, that is the actual company that has the Telerik product, has the Kendo product. You might be familiar with those. We call them dev tools. We also have a product called Sitefinity, which is a CMS platform. Um, and I am the manager of technical support for the Americas. So we have dev tools, a bunch of engineers that take support phone calls from some customers. We answer your support tickets. So if you open up a case, hey, I'm having trouble connecting to the Teller NuGet server, we'll help you there. That's my team. I also, because there's overlap with like being a Microsoft MVP, doing community engagements, hopping on shows like with yours, I like to stay engaged with the folks that are doing day-to-day work too, right? Um, so I'll do things like we have the VS Code Dev Tour coming up. It's called VS Code Day Dev Days. That tour is coming up. It's on the Microsoft website. So I'll be hosting that event in Boston and Chicago. We're going to do that at the Progress and Microsoft offices. It's just helping people do what they need to do. The fundamentals of my job at Progress.
Great. Well, my experience going back 10, 12 years is that when I had a question, even if it was completely outside your domain, not only would you give me an answer, but you give me an extensive answer, not only what to do, but why and how. So I'm appreciative of that. And I'm hoping today we can do a similar dive, a little bit at least, into Copilot, Copilot agents, and MCP. First of all, why don't you help me disentangle what those three things are?
That's the best place to start. So Copilot is kind of an overused term. You hear about it, Copilot this, Copilot that, GitHub Copilot, Copilot agents. There is a difference. Copilot is kind of the branding of the AI service. There is Microsoft 365 Copilot. That is a Copilot that has access to all of your organizational documents, your Microsoft Teams history, everything in your work bubble. Regular Copilot chat does not. So you can think of Copilot chat as like a chat GPT. Now that's Copilot and Microsoft 365 Copilot. GitHub Copilot is something entirely different. It is geared towards developers and is surfaced through developer tools. So you kind of use your GitHub account with your GitHub license, and you can get this GitHub Copilot AI service brought to you either in VS or VS Code or even in GitHub itself. Like in pull requests, you can have GitHub Copilot review your pull requests or code changes. It's just the AI service itself. So for the rest of the episode, in case we don't say GitHub Copilot, we're referring to GitHub Copilot if we say Copilot this or that.
Great. Now, am I right
MCP,
that
oh, go
before you
ahead.
get to MCP, am I right that Copilot has a certain number of tokens depending on what level? I think as an MVP, we don't run into that. And so I've been curious about am I right that we don't run into that? Let's start there.
So there's a good distinction here between token limit and prompt limit. So prompt is when you put in a question and you're getting an answer for that question. You do have a higher license, you have unlimited prompts, right? Your use. I'm not so sure what the free tier is, but it's pretty generous, right? If you have a GitHub account, you go into your account and then you'll see on your settings page in your profile that there's a settings area for Copilot. And you'll see that there are different levels. You mentioned token limit though. So tokens are, let's say we have a sentence of 10 words and you're putting that into your prompt and you ask the AI, here's my 10-word question. It's not 10 tokens. It's probably going to be around 15 or 16 tokens. They're kind of like little 2 or 3 character slots, slices of the sentence, and those tokens count up to the total token limit for that prompt. You hear things like, oh, there's a million token limit. That's not the number today. Microsoft won't divulge the exact number, but honestly, it changes depending on the prompt itself. So your entire conversation history that you've had with the Copilot agent at the time builds on top of the token. So it knows the last thing you asked and it keeps that kind of like in memory. So the tokens kind of build up over the timeline of your conversation. But a million tokens is quite large. And I would say that can be your expectation of a conversation with GitHub Copilot.
Right. So is it worthwhile to cut out the chatter that people like to put, hey, chat, hey, Copilot,
Oh,
how you feeling today? Okay, here's what I'd like to accomplish. I mean, should all that chatter be eliminated so that you're saving on all those tokens?
that is a very good question because some services don't send that with the actual into the AI processing. So it knows how to remove the gratuities, like thank you, you're welcome, I appreciate all these different things. And I might be wrong. I think Copilot has that built in, so it kind of filters out the stuff and doesn't use it up as part of the prompt. But I would say don't worry about it. Have a natural conversation. Give it as much context as you can. Like if I could explain something in 2 sentences, or I could explain it in 10 sentences. I will try to do it in the 10 sentences that has more nuance and more detail about what I want. Then I'll get a better result from the AI.
Yeah, one of the things that James Montemagno pushed very hard was context, context, and context.
Yep.
That's a key aspect of getting a good result out of Copilot, especially within a development environment.
Yep, that's exactly what that is. So that 10 sentence one versus the 2 sentence one, I'm able to say, I want my result in JSON. I want the first property to be named person. The second property is under there. It can be age, first name, last name, right? So you can kind of describe your entity. And it will actually give you back perfect JSON. Like you can rely on it for a REST API if you needed to. And it's about giving it the proper context and what it needs. Um,
Well,
I
there's
have
also
another
the
McCarthy.
markup file that you
Yeah,
can drop down that says whenever you're working on X, make sure you do it in Y. And what I don't use that extensively, but what I do have in there is when you're doing testing, use XUnit and mock, and that saves having to say that again and again and again. And there are things like that that you can do, and in fact, you can set that up so that that gets put into your source control or not, depending on which file you put it into.
Yep. And that's where GitHub Copilot actually shines too, because it knows how to read those config files. And that is the beginning of the context, which adds towards the token limit and all that kind of stuff. But that just goes to show that you don't really have to worry about it. We're at a point these days with AI that you don't have to count your tokens, right? Just make sure you have enough context to get an accurate answer. The more context you give it, the likelihood of hallucinations drops almost square to the amount of context you give. Um, yeah, the examples usually help with this. I can't say exactly which ones I use, but the concept is, let's say I'm going to use AI to do a VDA. A VDA is a volume driver analysis. Let's say I want to know, um, out of the past 1 year, all of the GitHub issues that have been opened on my repositories. I want you to go through all of them and tell me what is like the most mentioned, right? What is causing the most headache? Is it bugs? Is it this? And the VDA will tell you that. The AI will go through and say, well, people are asking for custom help 30 times. People are asking for styling help 10 times. People are asking for this. So you start to see patterns emerge. That's what a VDA does. AIs are great at VDA, and I'm using them for that pretty extensively. But again, it's like we're really not even taking advantage of this to its fullest yet. And when we go into what MCP servers are and GitHub Copilot chat inside of Visual Studio, and the way you can use it in your tool these days kind of changes the game here.
Yes, and I want to get to that in about 10 seconds. I will confess that one of the places that I use Copilot is I'll say to Copilot, write unit tests for this. And I'd say it gets about 90% right. Now, one of the things I need to learn to do, and I'll probably ask you offline, is we have a very specific way using reflection for dealing with private repository methods. And Copilot has a different way of doing it. So I need to use that MD file, the configuration file, to say, when you're doing this kind of file, please use this kind of reflection. And there probably
Yep.
is a way to say that.
Yeah, you can just ask it in plain language, but even better, give it an example. Say, this is how I want this done. In the following code block is a premium example of how it should be done. It'll take that in the context, look at the example, and say, oh, you like to have your brackets here, you like to have this here, you like to have the namespace here, and it'll match it.
Great. The other feature that I'm going to ask for from Microsoft eventually is to have it read my style cop, and
Hmm.
then all the code it generates, make it consistent with that. Now I said that to Mads, and he said, "You still use style cop?" So yeah, that's an open question as well. Okay, let's talk about MCP servers. We've been teasing that. Let's start with what they are, and then let's get into where you get them and how you use them.
So we've been talking about the Copilot as a service. So how do you actually use it? In Visual Studio, you have a little button that says Open Copilot Chat, and you'll get that Visual Studio pane. The same exact thing is in VS Code, right? You just click the little Copilot button, Open Copilot Chat, and you get a pane. And it's just like any other messaging kind of chat where you have the area with the list view in it that shows your conversation history. And then you have a little input area where you type in your question. There's some slight variance on like what kind of buttons are in different places, but they all do the same thing. You'll have a button that says, I want to ask questions to GitHub Copilot, and that's the ask one. But if you drop that down and change it to agents, you're now in a thing called agentic mode. Agents mean you can tell Copilot you want to have it use special services that are an expert in the thing that service offers. So agentic mode, you'll hear the word agentic. That means that you're combining agents that do different things. And why is this important? Because people have been using AI kind of single focused. ChatGPT 4, whatever, right? GPT 5 just came out. What if you could have GPT being the base conversationalist? But then GPT can ask other experts that it is not an expert in. So you can have another AI model or service as an agent. And this agent might be specialized in image recognition. You have another agent that's specialized in translation. You have another model or agent that can do video generation, right? So this is the idea is that you have a whole team of expert AI models and agents that now are all connected to your Copilot chat as one big team working for your end result. So how do you talk to the agents? That is MCP. MCP stands for Model Context Protocol. I think the best analogy I've come up with so far is that MCP is for AI, what REST is for the internet. So you have REST services everywhere, all over the internet. You know it's a standard protocol. You know how to use each one of the REST endpoints. You know what a put request is. You know what a get is, right? Everyone knows how to use that because it's a standard.
And
Same
that's
thing
what I
for
do every
MCP.
day, all day. So
Exactly, right?
you're speaking to my heart.
Yep. And that's essentially what MCP is. To demystify it, it is just a protocol that allows one AI service to use another one. So now, why is this relevant to GitHub Copilot? Because inside Visual Studio, you can add an MCP server as an endpoint. So if you go down to that little chat box that I was talking about where you changed it to agentic mode, there's another little button that looks like a wrench, and those are your tools. Those are what you have for agents to help you. If you open that up, you can see checkboxes for the different services available. By default, you have the GitHub Copilot ones, which is the top checkbox, and it has all of these other little agents in it that help. But you can add yours. So I think the best example today is to use one of my company's agents. Let's say I'm building a .NET MAUI app or Blazor. Let's use Blazor. We have our product called UI for Blazor. Like Telerik is known for the UI components. So we build these UI components for a Blazor application like data grids, charts, and all sorts of stuff. What if you wanted an agent that is specialized in the Telerik Blazor controls? And we offer that. All you have to do is you add our MCP server to your Visual Studio, your list of MCP servers, and now it's a tool in your chat window with Copilot. And the way you reference it is you just say it's like you're on Twitter or X. You just use the at mention, say at Teller Blazor Assistant, and then GitHub Copilot says, "Oh, let me send this question over to the agent to answer this," and it'll do that. It's pretty cool the way that it gets rendered, and it helps you.
Can I do that in Blue Sky instead of X, please?
Yeah, it's like a blue sky handle.
There you
Matter
go.
of fact, the hashtags work the same way, and the ad handles work the same way. So
Yes, they do.
we'll skeet it.
There you go. Sorry, I
Yeah.
took us down there.
No, I moved all my Twitter history to Blue Sky. I still have both accounts because I want to be able to interact with people where they need my help, you know. But
Just
matter of
as an
fact,
aside, before you go back, is
yeah.
there a way, since you did it, to take all of your followers with you? I
Ooh,
don't think there is.
no, because you would need. I mean, you might be able to write something that looks them up first, but it's not a guarantee that the handle is the same.
Right, right. Because I
Or the
went from
name.
13,000 followers to 13, so
Yeah.
it was painful.
Well, you should go to my on my Blue Sky. I have custom channels, or not channels, lists that follow these other things, and you can probably find a lot of them there.
Right. And what's your handle on Blue Sky so people can
It
find you?
is it Lance Develop? I use my own domain. Let me
Hmm.
see.
One of the ways that you can certify that you have a true account as opposed to a
Yep,
spoof account is to use a domain. So, for example, my handle is at jesseliberty.com.
yep. So I bought the Lance.Boston domain,
Oh, nice.
and I did it specifically for Blue Sky because I have develop.com. That's where all my blog is and all of
Hmm.
my self-hosted services. Like just to the left of me by 2 feet, I have a 42U rack. It's only half full right now,
Good
but
grief.
of like a Raspberry Pi rack, a bunch of Ubiquity gear and routing. So I do a bunch of self-hosting, and a handful of those I make available to myself when I'm out of the house. And I do that with the custom domain, and I route it to Azure. But it is
And
fun. It's
before we
worth
go
it.
back, you have develop.com.
Yep.
That you must have gotten in early because that is a hell of a domain. And I'm surprised no one has offered to buy that from you.
Oh, they do. At least once a year, I get an offer to sell it. And yep. It came from Nokia. So back when I was with Nokia, as a developer evangelist or ambassador is what we were called back then. All of our developer challenges were on develop.com. So you could do like you submit a new app to the store and you get a badge for submitting an app to the store. You published your first app and a bunch of different ways to level up. And the way develop is spelled is because it sounds like level up too. So you could pronounce it develop up, but it's dvlup.com.
Okay, we'll
Like
put
that.
that in the show notes.
Yep.
Now, let me take you out of the rabbit hole that I just put you in and bring us back to MCP. And you said an interesting thing. You said MCP server. Now, does that imply that there is somewhere up in the cloud an actual server, or what does that word mean in this context?
It is actually both. So you can have your, up until a week or two ago, right? It was kind of all done locally. You have a little either .NET app or a Node.js app, and it runs locally. So let's step back to how you actually add the MCP server to GitHub Copilot. It's a configuration file, and you open up the .mcp.json file, or in VS Code, it's just mcp.json. In there, it's just a JSON list of configurations. This is the name of it. This is the name of the server itself. And that's how you do the at mention, by the way. Like, that's how you get the handle. Under there, you have a path, and that path value is to be set to where the executable is locally. Now, that's .NET version. You can also do it in a Node version, and the executable is actually the Node package. So Node.js behind the scenes will download it and run it. And but basically, all it is just a list of this is where the application is, and this is the name of it. That happens because Visual Studio knows how to start up the MCP server. It just looks at it, says, here's the path to the thing I need to run, and here's the command I need to start it, and here's the name of it. Now, inside that app is kind of what answers your question. It is, it's kind of like a REST API controller, right? So your API controller in your .NET app has your methods to communicate and respond to different REST requests. The same concept is inside this application that VS starts up. So it'll have the endpoints and it knows how to respond to anything that you've asked for inside of the GitHub Copilot chat. It's kind of like if you are spinning up a local REST API on IIS and you just do localhost slash API get weather, right? The same thing with this application that you're actually running. It's hard to show without examples. I have an example on GitHub to make it very, very simple. Um, you could spin it up now if you wanted to. It'll pull it in just by saying the name of it and where it comes from. And that's what the node packages are helpful for, is that they don't actually need your code locally. You just say, this is the name of the package, and it pulls it down. What is it running inside that package? Code that answers the MCP request.
So if I'm a developer, I'm Joe developer. Am I writing MCP servers or am I just using other people's MCP servers or both?
If you're just a developer and you're using it, you're using other people's MCP servers. But you can, let's say you had a custom need and you wanted your own agent in GitHub Copilot, you could do an MCP server and spin that up locally and always have it available. Um, and the example I used in my demos on my GitHub, I just have a repo called MCP servers, And in there, I have a method that returns a Fibonacci sequence. I have a method that returns date time or something like that. Um, but there's no actual AI involved in the MCP server itself. That's the funny part, and I think that's the important distinction. The REST API, the MCP server, is returning whatever it got asked. Now, if you needed more AI in yours, right, you wanted it a specialized AI, your MCP server becomes a proxy to whatever backend cloud service that you need to specialize. So VS Code will hit your local little server. It'll proxy out the exact request that is needed because it actually knows what keywords to hit and whatnot. Then that message will get responded back down to your MCP server and then brought back to the user through GitHub Copilot.
What I'd like to do, if you're up for it, is have another show in which we dive a little bit more deeply into MCP servers, both their use and their creation, because we're about to run out of time and there's a lot there, I think.
There's absolutely a lot. And I love that idea because I can start off simple. We can spend the first 10 to 15 minutes on just an MCP server that returns a Fibonacci sequence.
That
And that
sounds
kind of
great.
that locks it in, right? That shows you how it works.
Yes, that sounds perfect. You and I will schedule that. And these podcasts are now also on YouTube. That may be a good one to really focus on YouTube so you can bring up your screen and provide some examples.
Absolutely. Yep. Next time we'll do, I have the code all ready to go. And this is fortuitous because GitHub just introduced a remote MCP capability. So you can bypass that local little server and go directly to a cloud service. So you can run your MCP server in Azure or whatever and bypass the user needing to run it locally. So we can check that out too.
Before you go, okay, I tell you about my new T-shirt. It shows a father and son, and they're outside, and there's all these clouds around. And the son says, "What are clouds made of, Daddy?" And he says, "Unix servers mostly."
He's not wrong.
Right, exactly. I cannot thank you enough. This was incredible. This was informative. This was great, and it was great talking with you, Lance. Thank you so much for doing this, and thank you for agreeing to come back.
Right back at you.